Good day and thank you for joining СивиЛНеթ today. My guest is the head of European delegation to Armenia, Ambassador Piotr Switalski. Thank you for joining us today, Ambassador. Well, let's start with what's impending, the elections, upcoming parliamentary elections in Armenia. The European Union has become a stakeholder of sorts because it's invested 90% of the external funding that would see the proper regulation and the organization of the parliamentary elections in Armenia. If I go into a little bit of details, 7 million out of that, 4 million for identification techniques, 2 million for cameras that weren't going to happen but did happen because the European Union came in with the financial aid. Not to mention 400,000 different programs for Council of Europe, 300 citizen observer, which a lot of people are banking on to help with the proper organization and monitoring of the elections. And well, you also mentioned in one of your interviews that the European Union is not only investing money in this, but also political credibility. So is the European Union, in a way, a stakeholder at what's going on in Armenia regarding the elections? And what's the margin of success that would satisfy the European Union to call the elections fair?
Indeed, the European Union has invested a lot in the preparations to the elections in Armenia. And it's not only about money, as you said, although even when you look at the financial side, it's quite unprecedented. The European Union has never done it before in any Eastern Partnership country. So it is a precedent, a very important precedent, but it's more than simply financial resources. It's the very fact that the European Union has been quite active here in Armenia in order to achieve a broad consensus and understanding among the political forces how to prepare for the elections, what kind of technology to install, what kind of arrangements to implement. Therefore, yes, we are keenly interested that the elections in Armenia are held in the most transparent, fair, just manner. And we believe it's very important for Armenia itself. Because the future of Armenia, its political and economic development depend very much on how the elections are held, what kind of trust is rebuilt. The main thing here is that the population itself should judge the elections as reflecting their political preferences, their political choices. That's the most important. So the ultimate judge of the fairness of the elections will be the people themselves.
So if, as usual, there are no rallies and there's no, after the elections, because there's usually, as is Armenia's case, usually after elections, there's always a group of people. People are not happy with the outcome of the elections. In case there is none of that, people going out to the streets or complaining about the European Union has no other criteria as to judge what, if the elections were fair or not?
For us, the point of departure will be the opinion by the Venice Commission and the OSCE, the opinion of international observers. And as you know, the European Union is working very closely with the international institutions so that after the elections we will have a very full and objective picture of what happened. The second element is, of course, the activities of the local observers. And as you know, the European Union has provided a lot of money to support the local observation effort by non-governmental organizations. We hope very much that several thousand people will benefit from the support of the European Union to this process. Of course, as you said, in even the most advanced democracies, in the most democratic countries, there are always people who complain, who are not satisfied with the result, who can see here or there shortcomings in how the procedural aspects of elections are conducted. And therefore, we as the European Union, we stressed from the beginning the necessity to have a very transparent procedure for lodging and then dealing with complaints. Here, the role of the Central Electoral Commission and also the judicial system is very important, and we hope very much that this will be done in a way which will dispel all possible doubts. Let me say that so far, when we look at the preparations, the effort done by different stakeholders, we can be only satisfied because the institutions, the government, the Central Electoral Commission, but also our partners in the civil society, they are displaying the maximum goodwill and best effort in order to make all these arrangements provided for by the Electoral Code are put in place and are implemented very effectively. But the process is very challenging because some of the arrangements are quite new. Some of the technologies are also requiring careful testing. But we hope very much that all these aspects, and this is a very comprehensive process, starting now from the installation of the voter identification technology, but also providing for fair access to media and so on and so forth, then the proper activities on the election day, and then after elections, all the procedure for examining complaints, that everything will be done in a way which will ensure the best possible standards. And let me mention that among the figures that you referred to, there is also one figure that should be also taken into account. We reserved 1 million euros to be transferred to the authorities for the activities linked to the elections, but only after the election process. This 1 million is based on the conditionality that we as the European Union and our member states are satisfied with the way all these arrangements are implemented.
So that 1 million would be utilized in what capacity by the state after it being transferred? It's going to the state fund? Is it going to be spent on post-electoral processes?
No, it will be a transfer to the budget to cover some of the additional expenses which are incurred now by the government, because the government had to advance some money, but also there will be other expenses linked to the electoral process. So to have the full financial picture, one should not forget about this 1 million coming after the elections.
Ambassador Switalski, the electoral code of Armenia is going to be tested this time, and the elections are only a couple of weeks away. What's the European Union's take on the value of the new electoral code of Armenia, given that it's quite innovative, that there are things in that no other country has ever done, and if the testing has been done properly up till this point? Regarding the testing with cameras, where they will be placed, how they will, there's a lot of concern that they haven't been tested sufficiently. The same with the identification technology.
Well, we have never passed an official view on the contents of the electoral code, but we followed very closely the discussions, both the internal discussions here in Armenia, but also the discussions between the government of Armenia and the Venice Commission and the OSCE. So we contributed to the discussion. We believe that indeed this electoral code will be put to a very serious test, because some of the elements of the code are quite new. So we will have the judgment after these elements will be tested. What I can say is that, as you know, a lot of the critical remarks submitted by the Venice Commission and OSCE have been incorporated into the subsequent drafts of the electoral code. Some of the critical remarks have not been incorporated. we understand also that the civil society and the opposition have very serious reservations about some of the elements of the electoral code, including the limitation of the number of observers and media, including also the punitive arrangements concerning the so-called fake reporting of the results. We hope very much that these restrictive elements, which provoked so much controversy in Armenia, will not be put into operation. There will be no necessity to test them in practice, so that we could avoid additional controversy during and after the election day. So we will see. I deeply believe that in the light of the elections, the electoral code will further be developed and improvements will be made in future elections. This also relates to one of the issues which I don't think is now satisfactorily reflected, the role of women in the electoral process. As promised by the government, we hope very much that the ratio of women on the ballot list and finally in the parliament will be significantly increased in the next elections. So we very much consider that elections in Armenia are a step, but not the final step. That is a work in progress. Building democratic institutions is a work in progress. So we hope very much that the next elections will be a very important qualitative step forward in developing good democratic practices and procedures in Armenia, but definitely it will not be the final say.
Well, you show a lot of trust and goodwill and in the process. And however, another question: how, in case the outcome of the organization of the elections is not satisfactory, how will this affect Armenia-EU relations?
Let me say very openly that in all my contacts here with the representatives of the government and other institutions responsible for the conduct of elections, I am receiving very strong assurances that everything will be done in order to make these elections good elections, replying to the most demanding standards of Western democracy. And this is also something what the President of Armenia made unequivocal during his conversations in Brussels the beginning of this week when meeting the leaders of the European Union. The authorities of Armenia use every occasion to pass the message that they understand the importance of the elections and they will do everything in order that elections are seen as responding to the highest standards. And I have no reason to put any doubt in the declarations because, as I can tell you, in my working level contacts in the past several months, I have seen a lot of goodwill and a lot of hard work which make these declarations very credible declarations.
So the Armenia-European Association Agreement deal has not been signed yet, but it's been resumed, something that was interrupted in 2013. And at what point are we? Is the association agreement still in danger, or is it on its way to being signed?
Let's clarify. We are not talking now about an association agreement. Association agreement is the thing of the past, unfortunately. 2013, when the association agreement was on the agenda, and we had to accept that it is not possible to be implemented in our relations with Armenia. So what we are talking about now is a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement. That is the name of the new arrangement that we will be having. The situation is that, and СивиЛНеթ is the first media outlet which I'm talking about it fresh from the visit of the President in Brussels. So the negotiations on substance of the agreement have been concluded successfully, as declared by President Sargsyan and President Tusk last Monday. So the agreement is there. You must still be very patient before it will be signed and then put into operation, because now, in particular, the legal services of both sides have to look at the text, have to verify all the expressions and terminology used. They have to look whether there are any discrepancies, any inconsistencies of technical nature. So this process will take some days, but hopefully quite soon, still in the month of March, this agreement can be initialed by both parties. Then after the initialing, and initialing means the confirmation that what is on paper reflects the outcome of the negotiations. Then after the initialing, this agreement will have to be translated in all the languages of the European Union. The European Union will seek the approval of the Council, which is the approval of all member states for the signing ceremony of the agreement. So it's a quite complicated way, but I think that the Armenian citizens have to be confident that the negotiations on substance are over with a very good result, successful result, and then now it's the technical part of it, which I hope will develop in an unhindered way, and then all the other steps necessary to put this agreement into operation will be implemented according to the schedule. This schedule has been discussed and agreed during the meetings of the President of Armenia in Brussels with the leaders of the European Union. So I think that we are now on safe track. The most important message is we have a successful conclusion of the negotiations.
Ambassador Switalski, in everyone's mind, this agreement, the second is a continuation of the association agreement, but however, in essence, they're different, even in name, they're different. What are the provisions that, well, everyone thinks that with the EU, Armenia made a mistake, it was interrupted, but now we're taking off where we left off. Is that the case, or this is a completely new format of association, of partnership?
We should stick to the official term partnership. The term association is reserved for the association agreement, and countries like Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, they have the association agreement, so they are called association partners, association countries. Armenia is a partnership country, but I think that this agreement, which has been now concluded, reflects probably the maximum of what we can have, bearing in mind the fact that Armenia is part of another integration project. So a lot of substance, in particular in the political part of the agreement, from the association agreement, has been preserved. I would say even that probably all of this substance, with some variations, some different terminology and so on and so forth, has been preserved, which means that we have now a very solid basis to develop political contacts, cooperation in various fields, including security field, which is a new element, and we have a strong basis of values, because this political part of the agreement now with Armenia, incorporating the previous association provisions, speaks about us cooperating to enhance the common values, democracy, human rights, rule of law. And I think it's very important also for the people of Armenia to see that this agreement consolidates the bridge of values linking Armenia with the European Union, with other European countries. Where we had to settle for less ambitious agenda is definitely the trade and investment part. The association agreements with other countries, including Georgia, are based on the philosophy of approximation and preferential treatment. Trade with Georgia, with Moldova, and the European Union is based on preferential treatment. It's not possible to have it with Armenia, but still I believe that the trade part contains a number of very important elements which will contribute to the increase of the volume of trade between the European Union and Armenia. There is still the investment protection part, which cannot be now fully reflected in the agreement, but that's for internal reasons which have to do with the European Union. The Armenian side was very interested in having a very full-fledged chapter concerning investment protection, but we will have to wait because there will be a so-called rendezvous clause which will obligate us to sit together again, the European Union and Armenia, and to discuss the arrangements for investment protection. This is very important because both Armenia and the European Union are interested in promoting more European investment in Armenia. And I still believe that this agreement will encourage European investors to consider Armenia as the place for doing business.
On basis of security and protection of funds and businesses?
That's another story. I can tell you that the President of Armenia and President Juncker had a very long discussion on how to promote more European investment in Armenia. A very good discussion, very constructive discussion. So therefore I can say on the basis of this discussion that the interest is mutual, the interest is reciprocal. We have to work hard, and I myself, I spend a lot of time discussing with the Prime Minister what kind of encouragement is necessary to boost the European investment in Armenia. And I can say that several important improvements have been already introduced. To give you one example, one of the points which made the foreign investors here in Armenia complain was the fact that there were so-called reference prices which were used as basis for custom duties on the technology and equipment imported by European investors from Europe. The Prime Minister very quickly, upon also our request, that European partners are credible enough to base the custom duties on the invoices. That in Europe, when you have an invoice, that's the basis. You don't have to refer to these references prices in order to determine what kind of value the imported goods are. And I think that's very important. This demand by the European investors have been met, and there are also some other elements that we are discussing, and I can see a lot of openness. That's quite a new thing in Armenia, that the authorities are very constructively considering these requests. But as you said, there are some other more important issues, including security, which also are factors when a European, particularly big European company is considering whether to invest millions. They have to look also what kind of risks, bigger political or security risks are involved.
Also legal security, I think they have to trust the courts in Armenia in that sense. The new partnership agreement it's based on values, values. But for example, I couldn't help but think of this one example. Russia backtracked on the domestic violence bill, something that Armenia has been waiting to pass for years, and hopes were that any day now the domestic violence bill, the legislation would pass. Do you think such influences from Russia, as Armenia sometimes tends to follow in Russia's footsteps would influence the agreement or Armenia's behavior?
Well, we consider Armenia to be quite sovereign in its choices, in particular concerning legislation on such issues. Like the domestic violence. Let me recall that Armenia has concluded with the European Union a human rights budget support contract, and Armenia declared on its own initiative that it will pass the law on domestic violence. What we have now, we are told, is a delay. But nobody in Armenia, nobody in the government at least, is telling us that the goal of adopting the law on domestic violence is totally abandoned. No, we have a delay. That most probably after the elections, this law will be adopted, because we believe that this is a very important law for Armenia. I think that Armenia will benefit a lot from enhancing the role of women in politics, in business, in introducing these modern standards of the role of women in a society. So the domestic law is important for Armenia, and I hope that Armenians will realize it, that nobody is trying, at least from Europe, to impose anything on Armenia. It's not the intention. I mean, it's about your future. You want this future, you have it. You want another future, you decide. I believe that, of course, there are always people from abroad who will try to give you advice here and on there. But I have full confidence in Armenians that they are quite mature enough in order to decide what is better for the future of the country and the society.
The European Union has been fighting against corruption in Armenia for so long and not sparing any efforts in the fight against corruption. And the customs unions, for example, as an example, was a corrupt, or apparently there's some improvement there. So how would you evaluate the European Union's fight against corruption in Armenia? What has gone forward? What has improved? What is adamant and not going forward?
Well, what we can state with satisfaction is that in the recent months we have witnessed some concrete steps in order to speed up the fight against corruption in Armenia. At least what we are quite happy with is that the diagnosis of the situation, the identification of the corruption risks is very similar by the new government and us, the European Union, but also other partners. And the new steps that I'm referring to concern mainly some legislative acts, in particular the law against the illicit enrichment, which will take force only this summer, but still it has been adopted and it is a very good law. There are some other plans, including the plans that the European Union is fully supporting and has been supporting for years in Armenia, like the creation of the independent anti-corruption agency, which is in the final stages of say preparation. So we are looking forward to the adoption of the necessary laws. So what we have now in terms of the change is some new pieces of legislation, very important, additional pieces of legislating in the pipeline. We have plans to create institutions. So we have laws, we have institutions. What we need still is the public reaction, public support. I think the society itself should be fully on board and should show intolerance to corruption practices. That's, I think, very important. And we should also count on the good political will from the leaders, from the people occupying high positions in government, in other state structures, in order to implement all these provisions. I have had very good conversation with the Prime Minister, and we as the European Union have been presented with concrete steps that the current government is planning to implement. And we are considering to what extent we can be helpful as the European Union. And I can say that the requests that have been formulated by the Prime Minister during his meeting with me can be supported by the European Union. We are now working, doing our homework in order to respond constructively to these requests. So we believe that Armenia can make a big progress. And it's doable. I always refer to the experience of Georgia. Georgia now is faring very well in terms of the fight against corruption. Georgia is perceived much better than some of the EU member states even. And when you look back 20 years ago, the situation concerning corruption in Georgia was much worse than in Armenia. So it is doable. Yes, you can do it.
Well, I remember a press conference from you a little less than a year ago, and you expressed your dissatisfaction with the progress of the anti-corruption. Has that changed? Has the dynamics changed in the last months?
Yes, the dynamic has changed. And already before summer, even during the previous government, we have started receiving quite good signals. The work on some of the pieces of legislation started still under the previous government, so the change is visible. As I said, we have to be patient. We have to look how the measures and the plans are implemented, because the fight against corruption, you can have very lofty intentions and make good declarations, but as they say in the British Islands, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. The most important thing is determination to implement good laws. There's no much point to be, hard on laws but soft on implementation. The experience of other European countries shows that the toughest point in the fight against corruption is the implementation of the laws.
Ambassador Switalski, one last question. The role of civil society in Armenia. Is civil society active enough? Or what role can it play in assisting the government in the implementation of these some legislation and laws or improvement development plans? And what if the civil society is vocal enough with whatever dissatisfaction it has?
Well, we consider the civil society in Armenia to be one of its strongest assets of the Republic of Armenia. I think that Armenia can be proud of its very vibrant civil society. Civil society, of course, sometimes can be seen as difficult. In particular, the activist civil society organizations, they mainly complain everywhere. In democratic countries, that's their role, to provide the alternative view, to confront the government with popular sentiments of ordinary people, to organize them and to voice them. And the Armenian civil society is a very useful partner for us. I think that it can play even a bigger role in many endeavors here in Armenia to improve various segments of the state management and economy. We talked about corruption. Armenia has civil society organization with very strong competence, really very good expertise in terms of the fight against corruption. I am very, encouraged by the declaration of the new Prime Minister, who said that he wants to have the involvement of civil society in the fight against corruption, in the work of the Anti-Corruption Council, even bigger. And that's very good, because when I go and meet some organizations, being the organization of the Armenian lawyers, being the Transparency International, other, what I can see is people who know the subject, people who know the experience of other countries, and people who can help the government and different institutions to make the work against corruption more effective. So the potential is ever in all segments, being human rights, being social issues, regional development. And the problem of the civil society in Armenia is the weak financial basis. We should have more possibility for civil society to have access to local funds. One good improvement has already been made. That's the law on NGO, the new law on NGO, which allows civil society organization, in particular in the social field, to earn money, to simply receive money in exchange for their services. And that's also the experience of many European countries. Social services performed by civil society organizations are cheaper than services provided by the state, and they are sometimes more efficient. But also, I think the access of civil society to other sorts of funding in Armenia can be bigger, and this would help to make the activities, make the contribution even more visible. So we are supporting it. As you know, we have a multi-million program now being implemented to support the capacity of small, in particular, small civil society organizations, in particular in the regions. We have just launched a new one which links the diaspora civil society, Armenian diaspora, with the local civil society organizations. And we want to continue, because when you compare Armenia with other countries, not only in the region, but the whole post-Soviet space, this vibrant civil society activism in Armenia makes Armenia very visible. So instead of being afraid, I think the partners should encourage more civil society.
How about the media? I know I said was the last question. How about the role of media in developing in the country, in the affairs of the country, and raising awareness about certain issues?
Well, media is important in Armenia as well. Again, the Armenian media are quite pluralistic, and ＳիվիլՆեթ is one important contribution to the pluralism of Armenian media. What you do, I think, is a concrete expression of contributing to pluralism in Armenia. But of course, the main problem is financial sustainability of independent media. You cannot have independent media in any country if you do not have a stable financial basis. So hopefully when Armenia develops its economy, when there is more money on the market through advertisement or through subsidies and other forms of support, then the independence of media in Armenia will get stronger. The second important aspect is, of course, the immunity to political influences. Again, it's a big challenge to stay independent in every society. Look at the democratic Western societies. But again, I believe that Armenian journalists will resist all external pressures by different forces, will avoid self-censorship, which is very bad for, I think, for journalism when you impose on yourself certain limitations which restrict your independence, and so on and so forth. So what I can say is that at least my experience from the cooperation with Armenia is very positive. I can rely on objective reporting. I can rely on, in particular, on very accurate reflection of my statements. Sometimes, of course, there is a lot of speculation, unwarranted speculation. I think, like in many countries, Armenian media like to speculate, sometimes gossip. But that's part of the story. I cannot blame them.
At least we're not in the far forefronts of fake news at this point.
But frankly, this scourge of post facts and fake news is spreading everywhere. So I wish that you stay somehow resistant to this. But the upcoming election campaign will be a big test to what extent Armenian media and population are immune to the post-truth phenomenon.
So we promise to be alternative only in thinking and not in presenting facts. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you so much.
For your time, and we also thank the viewers for joining us.